Good morning, BST. My name is Elijah Abdul Sayed, and welcome to this special debate episode of BST Talks.
Hello, Cowboys. I'm the co-host of this podcast, Brady Volkman, and today we will have some of our BST students debate about whether GMOs are helpful or harmful.
These students have been giving the topic that they will be discussing beforehand, but have not been told who they will be debating against, nor which side of the argument they will be on.
The students that will be debating today are Luke Kiefel, Julie De Los Santos Escobar, Carmen Limon Higuera, and Killian Leong.
Each team will have a few minutes to set up their game plan, 2 minutes to discuss their argument, followed by 1 minute of rebuttals. Then, they'll have 2 minutes to discuss with each other to decide what to debate on. Next, they'll have 2 more minutes for rebuttals, and finally 1.5 minutes to state their conclusion and the topic at hand.
The first team will consist of Luke and Killian, who will be arguing that GMOs are helpful.
The second team will consist of Julie and Carmen, who will be arguing that GMOs are harmful.
Now, each team will be given 30 seconds to discuss their game plan together, starting now.
Time's up. Now, Team 1 has 2 minutes to give their arguments about how GMOs are helpful.
All right. Throughout the history of human society, we have continued to strive for different ways to change our environment to better improve our situation. Since the earliest years of hunter-gatherers, we can see that the domestication of plants was actually used to develop sedentary societies, something that drastically departed from the norm and natural environment, yet was still beneficial for society. Then, years later in the medieval times, we can see that things such as the three-field system were developed, where you would have two systems growing crops, or two fields in one that didn't have any. Once again, this was a defiance to the natural environment, but this is done for the sake of efficiently producing crops and livestock and different things for the people. Furthering that, we can see as early as 6000 BC and revitalized in the 1500s in Europe that crop rotation was used to manipulate the environment by having different crops grown in the same field in different seasons to replenish the nutrients. Once again, this was a defiance of nature because these crops would not naturally grow in this cycle, yet it was for the benefit of society and it was continued for those purposes. Even in artificial selection, we can see that things are already manipulated and traits are already forced in populations of animals and plants to improve our situation and to better produce agricultural yields. In the Green Revolution, GMOs only furthered this continuous pattern through the development of things such as soybeans and grains to benefit millions, if not billions, in the countries of India, China, and in other malnourished places of the world. Overall, despite the concerns that there may be, this is merely another not only natural but necessary step in human society. As many times before it was done, so too are GMOs being developed to better improve the human situation and to feed millions, billions of hungry mouths.
That's time. Now, Team 2 has 2 minutes to give their arguments about how GMOs are harmful.
Today we confront a critical issue in our food system, the widespread use of genetically modified organisms or GMOs. Proponents argue that GMOs promise higher yields and reduce resource use, but we must look deeper. The reality is that GMOs pose significant risks to our health, environment, and even the economic system. First, the long-term health effects of consuming GMOs remain largely unstudied. Reports of potential allergens and negative impacts on organ health should raise red flags for our consumers. Additionally, the environmental consequences are alarming. The reliance on monocultures can lead to biodiversity loss and the emergence of superweeds, ultimately harming our ecosystem. Moreover, the economic implications cannot be overlooked. A few corporations control the majority of the GMO seed market, trapping farmers in cycles of dependency and high costs that undermine their livelihoods. This corporate control also restricts farmers' ability to use traditional seeds, eroding agricultural diversity and resilience. As we move forward, it is crucial that we prioritize transparency, sustainability, and the health of both our environment and our communities. GMOs may seem like a quick fix, but the potential consequences demand a more cautious approach. Let's work toward a food system that respects our health, our farmers, and our planet.
Now, Team 1 has 1 minute for rebuttals.
You You said that how many issues have arisen, and which include the loss of biodiversity. But while there is indeed a risk of biodiversity, it's important to consider the fact that GMOs are primarily used in the field of agriculture, not so much for creating a unique natural environment. In the greater context of improving the human position, GMOs continue to remain beneficial. Not only that, but the threat to biodiversity is why actions can be taken to to protect species that are at risk, just as it has been done with endangered species in the past. In addition, without the use of GMOs, many species are put at even greater risk from the chemicals used in pesticides or their habitats being lost when people are forced to expand their agricultural areas when they refuse to use GMOs.
Time is up. Now, Team 2 has 1 minute for rebuttals.
While it's true that the domestication of plants led to sedentary societies, equating this process with modern GMOs is misleading. Traditional plant domestication was a slow selective breeding process that represented the natural evolutionary limits of plants. GMOs, on the other hand, involve direct genetic manipulation in ways that do not occur in nature, often inserting genes from unrelated species. The unintended consequences of GMOs, such as promoting monoculture contributing to biodiversity loss and increasing the reliance on chemical inputs like pesticides, pose serious risks to ecosystems and food security. For example, the widespread use of glyphosate-resistant crops has led to the overuse of herbicides, which has been linked to environmental harm, including soil degradation and contamination of water supplies. Thus, while domestication was largely beneficial for society development, GMOs introduce novel risks that can undermine long-term agricultural sustainability. And this is supported through the Institutes of Health (NIH) that discusses the environmental risks of GMOs, including risk herbicide use and its effect on soil and water systems.
Now, each team will be given 2 minutes to plan for their next rebuttals and their conclusion.
Now, Team 1 has 2 minutes for more rebuttals.
So some of the issues that you may argue or you may have raised was about the safety of GMOs, but we can see that according to consumer, social, and psychological factors influencing the use of genetically modified foods, a review, that despite the fact that public perception of GM foods in the global community is still unfavorable, people increasingly realize that GM products are also advantageous because of the research reports stating that GMO methods are safe and provide no cause for concern. Not only that, but it can also be seen that every single GMO is researched and approved by the FDA before being used in plants, as shown on their website. In addition to this, you argued earlier about the risks to biodiversity due to the use of GMOs, but once again, we would like to highlight the fact that not only are there things put in place, such as lists for endangered species already enacted, but you can also argue that without the use of GMOs and the need to expand farmlands to accommodate for the more food that needs to be produced, you're actually also putting animals at risk through the limiting of their habitats. And herbicides, you may have argued that it continues to rise with the use of superweeds, but it was long used before the use of superweeds as well. In addition to these things, you can also see that the artificial adaptation of unwanted weeds are harmful plants. Once again, the adaptation of the environment, regardless of whether or not it's done through GMOs, was also done through artificial forms and exerted a lot of resources in trying to get those same adaptations by chance. By doing this, you're merely finding a more efficient, streamlined way of adapting necessary adaptations in plants. In addition to that, we can also see that it helps to provide, once again, food for a more growing international population, as the current population is estimated to be 7.35 billion people. In 2030, it's expected to reach 8.5 billion and 9.7 billion in 2050, as seen once again in consumer, social, and psychological factors influencing the use of genetically modified foods, the review. So this shows that while there may be those concerns, once again, you have to consider the billions of people that are fed by these crops.
Time's up. Now, Team 2 has 2 minutes to state their rebuttals.
So while you guys have may brought up that defiance of the natural environment to efficiently produce crops for the people, there are other sustainable practices that exist. There are many sustainable agriculture methods such as organic farming, permaculture, and agroecology that can efficiently produce crops without genetically modifying organisms. These methods enhance soil health, increase biodiversity, and can be more resilient to pests and climate change. Ecological balance. Defying nature often leads to unintended consequences. For example, GMOs can disrupt local ecosystems, leading to the decline of beneficial insect populations and the rise of resistant pests. This ecological imbalance can ultimately harm crop productivity over time. Many GMO crops are also engineered to tolerate specific herbicides, leading to their increased use. This dependence on chemicals can harm soil health and water quality, creating longer term challenges that undermine agriculture efficiency.
While some argue GMOs help feed larger populations, there's no clear evidence that they consistently increase crop yields. The 2016 National Academies of Sciences report found no substantial yield advantage of GMOs over conventional crops. Additionally, safety concerns persist. A study published by Environmental Sciences Europe highlighted that long-term effects of GMOs on human health are still not fully understood. Moreover, GMOs often lead to increased pesticide use, contributing to environmental harm. Instead, sustainable farming methods can offer more reliable long-term solutions for global food security. While GMOs can be used to, while GMOs can be engineered to adapt to environmental conditions, this streamlined approach comes with serious risks. GMOs often promote monoculture farming, which reduces biodiversity and weakens ecosystems. The reliance on a narrow range of genetically modified crops can leave entire food systems vulnerable to disease and pests. In contrast, traditional farming methods and crop diversity naturally build resilience against environmental change. A study published in Frontiers in Plant Scientists highlights.
And that's time. Now, Team 1 will be given 1.5 minutes to state their conclusion.
Ultimately, it could be seen that, all things considered, GMOs continues to be a beneficial thing to human society. While there may be some aspects, such as the health risks that may be considered, they are continuing to research these things, and as we mentioned earlier, they do extensive research into the different crops that are cultivated before they're released. When it comes to the issue of significantly increasing production, we can see that regardless of how it may have changed yields and statistics, they have allowed, once again, crops to be developed in environments where it would have otherwise been impossible, such as through the adaptation of specific crops to different environments in areas such as China, India, and other countries across the world. Ultimately, while you may argue things such as biodiversity loss and things of this nature, it is also important to consider the greater good of the human situation, as well as the fact that efforts can continue to be made to conserve these things through greater efforts in local environments, national environments, preserving those things on different lists, as well as in the greater consideration of the losses that would be incurred through the loss of land used by animals in the expansion of lands without GMOs. While arguing monopolies is important to consider, it is also once more important to consider that crop yields, regardless of who they're being produced by, help to feed billions and help to prevent malnourishment and malnutrition across the globe. Ultimately, all things considered, it can be seen that this, in helping to better provide for the people, better feed the people in a variety of circumstances, is the best course forward and ultimately generally positive, even if newer methods continue to be developed.
Now Team 2 has 90 seconds to state their conclusion.
In conclusion, while GMOs are often presented as a panacea for the challenges of food production, a closer examination reveals that they pose significant risks to our health, the environment, and the economic stability of farmers. The potential health impacts of GMOs remain largely unstudied, leaving us with valid concerns about their long-term safety. Scientific assessments highlight that these organisms may contribute to unforeseen health issues, yet comprehensive long-term studies are still lacking. Environmentally, the reliance of monocultures associated with GMOs undermines biodiversity, creating new ecological challenges. The cultivation of genetically modified crops often leads to increased pesticide use, which not only harms beneficial insect populations but also contributes to soil degradation and water contamination. These practices threaten our ecosystems and compromise the resilience of our food systems against pests and climate change. Economically, the dominance of few corporations in the GMO market severely limits farmer autonomy, forcing many into cycles of dependency on proprietary seeds and associated chemicals. This reliance can perpetuate financial strain, particularly for smallholder farmers who may find themselves caught in a web of debt and limited options. Moreover, while proponents argue that GMOs are essentially for feeding and growing a global population, studies show that they do not consistently lead to increased crop yields compared to conventional agricultural methods. Evidence suggests that rather than adopting a one-size-fits-all approach.
Thanks for listening, guys. Tune in next time for a new episode.
And remember, be your best at BST.